Thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing your interpretation of the third part of my husband's China invasion dream. So it was a three-part dream, and I feel like the third part is it's us preparing and how we are preparing for the invasion. If I could just spend like 30 seconds to give you a quick synopsis of what we learned in the second part of the dream, which is how the invasion happens.
Sure.
There are ants in the marketplace, and they're going down through a trap door where there's been stealing in the marketplace, and they're going into the headquarters of another group of ants, and they're in disguise. And so they're actually working with aphids, and they're all in disguise. And in the natural, aphids gather information or gather resources for instruction in the process. And so we felt like this could be bugs in computer code that are like viruses causing destruction, but it's actually getting information in the process to the ants. And the ants in this dream were wearing drama masks. So we felt like this might have to do with media. And my husband's a computer scientist, and so God kind of speaks to him in computer code sometimes, so that's kind of part lending to that. But anyway, in the third dream, we knew we were being invaded by China, and we knew that the individual soldiers were small, but it was the overall size of the army that was a threat. So again, kind of pointing to ants. Since we didn't think we could keep them out of our house, we were building a fort out of our swing set in our backyard, and we were nailing slats up the front side. And someone asked us why we were only boarding up the front side. And we said, it's because last time they only came from that side. And since we knew they were going to overrun the house, we were trying to get tools out of the house that they might be able to use against us, like hammers to break down our fort. But we were leaving tools that we didn't need, like ratchets. So those are my husband's words, hammers versus ratchets. And then there were big gaping holes in the slats. And so we were just hoping that they wouldn't poke through the slats with any swords. But it was imminent, and we were in a hurry. And he had this dream, I think, November or December last year.
Wow, that's a really interesting dream. Neil, you want to take a first stab at it?
Yeah, this really is an interesting dream. I like the second part of your dream that talked about the ants and the aphids. I heard bugs, bugs like you were saying in computer viruses, but also a means of listening in on what the enemy is talking about or what you're being listened in on. Kind of like what the king of Aram had experienced when he was trying to attack the king of Israel, and every single time he went to go somewhere, it was like the Israelites either were in the wrong place of where he thought they were going to be, or they were attacking, or whatever. Nothing went right for the king of Aram. And so finally he brings in his wise guys and says, all right, which one of you is the traitor in my camp? Because the king of Israel knows exactly what we're doing before we do it. And so one of his guys kind of took him aside and said, it's not us. It's that guy, Elisha, the prophet. He hears in your bedroom the things that you're saying and tells it to the king of Israel. So these bugs are, I see them as things that we're able to listen, or they're able to listen in on what we're doing. But going to the third part of the dream, this is a spiritual warfare dream. So your fort swing set is kind of child's play. So your defense of your house is a childlike defense. The fact that it was boarded up on one side because that was the direction they came from before. One of the faults of the army is that we're always preparing for the last war. So when Vietnam happened, right after it, we were all taught in jungle warfare. Unfortunately, the next war that we faced was Desert Storm, and deserts, and there was no water, there was no jungle, there was nothing to eat or grow. So it's kind of has the same feeling that it's almost a warning that you shouldn't be preparing for the last war. Prepare and listen to the Holy Spirit for what's coming, and kind of like with the bugs, figure out ahead of time. You need intelligence to see around corners. You need to see the direction that the enemy's coming in the future. Let's see. The tools that you used, talk about the weapons of our warfare. They're not carnal. the weapons of our warfare are to the tearing down of strongholds. It's the spiritual armor of Ephesians 6. It's the sword of the Spirit that is the only offensive weapon in that. So hammers, I hear, if you have a hammer, every problem is a nail. So you got to pick the right tool for the right job, and leaving what you didn't see as useful, leave it behind at the house. The ratchets, you're ratcheting it up. Got to ratchet up your warfare. But okay, so that's kind of my take so far, John.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I picked up a lot of that too. I think a lot of it has to do with listening, and I think it's there's kind of a juxtaposition between what you determined. Now we didn't really get access to the first two parts of the dream, so we're kind of trusting you that what you're seeing is the Chinese. But it does resonate in the fact, in particular, through apps like TikTok, which we've known for years and years and years, as long as it's been out, that it's a data collection beast of the Chinese Communist Party. And Trump, when he was in office, warned everybody, and everybody promptly ignored him and simply signed up on TikTok. And they're stealing everything from the facial recognition of our children to our likes and dislikes and everything else. And nobody even seems to care anymore. But there's consequences in all of that. They're gathering immense amounts of intelligence. And that's kind of the ants. That's like the little pieces that we think, it's no big deal. We drop a piece here, we drop a crumb there. Yeah, but then they can follow you home, and then they know where you live, and then they know, so there's things like that. We also saw Chinese soldiers invading. Actually, we saw this in several dreams before, particularly in dreams related to the 2020 election. And the Senate Intelligence Committee, I think it was in July or August of 2020, well before November 3rd, came out and said that Russia and China and Iran had already been manipulating elections through cyber warfare. These aren't my words. They're not my ideas. This is the Senate Intelligence Committee. So this is, it's funny because when people suggest at this juncture that there was anything wrong with the elections, they want to censor you and ban you. But I don't see them censoring and banning the Senate Intelligence Committee for their own report that they said well in advance this was already happening. It's also one of the reasons why Trump shut the consulate in, I think it was Houston. The Chinese consulate in Houston was because there was a well-known both IP theft and cyber warfare component that was a part of that. And typically to shut a consulate of a foreign nation is a really, really big deal, but it kind of passed and nobody really understood what happened. I think it's interesting that you're deciding to go into your backyard to build a fort. And this is the idea of self-sustainability. If you're going to go up against a massive force of 1 million people or whatever we think that represents, building a fort with slats of wood in your backyard, it's almost akin to like being in a treehouse. And I think it's indicative of two things. One, a desire to be safe and to feel protected. And two, an absolute inadequate ability to come together and plan for warfare on a large scale. Again, what's really home right now for most people or what really hits home is what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. I have friends in Russia. I have friends in Ukraine, and whatever you think of what's going on there, I guarantee you things are not as they seem. But imagine if those people went into their backyards and built forts as tanks are rolling through the streets. Probably not an adequate way to defend themselves. So I think it's a couple of things. I think it's a warning. I think it's a warning of that there could be more than just a spiritual warfare component that we experience here in America. And again, another big piece of this, which we'll probably see over and over again, is we're in an active state of war here in America. People don't recognize it because it's a propaganda war. And whenever you say that, anybody immediately thinks that they get it and they understand and they're above the propaganda. I assure you probably 99% of the people in America have no clue how deep it goes, how bad it is, how much they're being programmed, and how much the voices of truth are being censored. And so it's things like that that we need to really understand. And we need to understand that shrinking into the past, which your backyard also represents the past, shrinking into the backyard and putting slats up are not going to prevent an army that if they want to come into your backyard, you're going to get taken, if not killed, as a prisoner of war. So I do think that we need to, the actionable intelligence are, the world right now is in a time of war. The world is. We're there by design. Don't let anybody ever convince you that whatever happens next was an accident or blame it on one person, because I assure you it's not. And if I had the time, I could historically prove this to you. You'll just have to take my word for it or study yourself. But that being said, we should prepare for things that are happening in the earth, like warfare. Spiritual warfare, yes, but beyond spiritual warfare, things like really understanding the truth, which is one of the reasons why we do this. It's one of the reasons why we have tonight, is because there's so much chaos going on, and there's so few leaders, particularly Christian leaders, that are standing up as any level of a voice of truth, that people need to have a source where they can go to get accurate information. And the source is, since dreams come from God, the source is your dreams. So I encourage people, examine Genesis 41, look at how Joseph broke down the dreams of Pharaoh, write down every single dream that you have. And now is a time to press into the Lord, to hear what he's saying and what he's whispering in your ear, and also how to prepare for the times and seasons we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing your husband's dream. I appreciate it.